What do good teachers do when their students just aren't getting it? This video will help you take actionable steps to check for understanding with your students during your lessons. In this video, I'm going to show you 10 fun, easy, and engaging ways to check for understanding with your students during your lessons. Hi, I'm Kimberly Deneen with Education Noir. At Education Noir, we help Black educators and parents level up their practice for student growth and achievement. If you're struggling with how to make sure your students are understanding what you're teaching during your lessons, this video will show you 10 ways you can use to make sure that your students are understanding what you're teaching. You've worked hard on your lessons, so let's make sure they're getting it. Let's get into the video. These 10 ways to check for understanding are not in any ranking order. Also, there are many ways to check for understanding during your lessons. Please post in the comments ways to check for understanding that have worked for you so that in this community we can glean from your experience. The most important thing as you're going through your lessons is to know and connect with your students. Building relationships with your students is an ongoing process and should not be something that's only done in September. Because I know my students so well and I have done the work of developing and building relationships with my students, I can often look at them and see when they're not getting it. Also, knowing my students so well has allowed them the comfort level to let me know when something's confusing for them or ask questions. So be sure that you're continuing the process of building relationship with your students. Number 1, exit slips. Exit slips are a short and concise formative assessment. These allow me to quickly see if my students understood what I taught for that lesson. And because they're short and concise, I can grade them pretty quickly and give my students immediate feedback. So exit slips are a great tool to check for understanding. Number 2 is plickers. Yes, I said plickers with a P, like Paul. Plickers is a fun, easy, and free tool that you can use after you've front-loaded all of your students' information into the app or on the website. Students will then get a card that you print out. I usually put it on cardstock so it's sturdy. And students will use that card to show their answer. And they do that based on the way that they hold the card. So if they hold it this way and they want their answer to be A, then the A would be facing at the top. They can choose A, B, C, or D as their answer. And then what happens is I've already put in my questions for that day's lesson, and I project them, and the students see the questions. When the questions show up along with the A, B, C, or D choices, they then use their card, they turn their card. And Plickers, the app, assigns each student a specific number that's specific to that student. So they can't switch cards because then it won't recognize them. It has to be the number that is, that coincides with that student. My students, which are in high school, love Plickers because Plickers is kind of like gamified. Even though they're doing an assessment, it's kind of more like, it feels more like a game to them. So Plickers is a great way to check for understanding. Number 3, rate your understanding. Most of us are probably familiar with this. However, I still want to include it because it is one that is never going away, whether we're in person or we're teaching remotely. So the first one is simply a thumbs up or a thumbs down. They can do that in person. They can do that remotely in the chat. I also like to use the thumbs to the side or the sideways thumb, and that represents I kind of understand it, right? Also, they could simply do a rating scale of 1 to 4, with 4 being I completely understand this content. And they can do that in person. They can do that with their fingers, or they can do that remotely in the chat. The main thing is making sure that you don't transition to something else if too many of your students don't understand. You can pull them into a small group while the others who do understand and get it are working on the next thing. And you can pull them into a small group and teach them, try to teach it in a different way. You can allow someone to be the expert and teach that group. However, you don't want to move on if they don't understand. I like this rate your understanding because you can do that right in the middle of the lesson. It doesn't have to be at the end of the lesson. It could be at any time during the lesson. This is great for when you're teaching new content. Number 4, invent the quiz. So this is where you would allow your students to come up with 10 higher order thinking questions. And then you would allow them to select 2 of those questions and write half a page answering those 2 questions. And this is a great way to check for understanding because studies show that students do not ask enough questions in school. And asking questions is actually a critical thinking skill and a higher order thinking skill. Number 5, so what journal. So this is where you would allow your students to write the main idea of the lesson in their journals. If they have a physical journal, they can do that. They can also do that in an e-portfolio and perhaps in a Word application or on a Google Doc or some other application where they can type out their thoughts. However, this is a great way for you to gauge whether that student understood what you taught for the day. If you find that they still don't get it, then you want to make a reteach plan. Number 6, sentence stems. I love using sentence stems with emerging bilinguals and students who are in special education programs. Sentence stems allows them to have part of the answer but complete the part that shows their understanding. For example, a couple of sentence stems that they could use are I believe that blank because blank, or I am confused by blank. So part of the answer is there, but the meaty part of the answer is on them to do the heavy lifting. Also, I love to use Harvard's Project Zero visible thinking routines. A couple of my favorites are the 3 whys. They are, why does this matter to me? Why does this matter to the world? And why does this matter to my community? Now, even though these are questions, we can make them sentence stems. We can say, this matters to me because blank. This matters to my community because blank. This matters to the world because blank. So they will finish out those sentence stems. Another one of Harvard's Project Zero visible thinking routines that I like is I used to think blank, but now I think blank. Keep in mind that Harvard's Project Zero visible thinking routines, there are so many of them. If you go to the website, you will find one specifically tailored to your content or what you're doing for that lesson. There are hundreds of them. So check it out when you get a chance. Actually, I'll put the link in the description so that way you can find it easily. Number 7, advertisement or infographic. Have the students create an advertisement or an infographic using visuals and text. For the infographic, have students use the free platform called Piktochart. I will also include that link in the descriptions so that you will easily find it. These are 2 engaging ways for students to really show what they know. These are great ways to check for understanding. Before I get into the last 2 of these checks for understanding, please tap that like button if you're getting value out of this video. Also, subscribe to the channel so that you will be notified when new videos are published. All right, let's get into number 8, which is 5 words. So what you're going to do is have the students write 5 words, and then they have to explain and justify the reason why they chose those 5 words that relate to your lesson that you taught that day. When they finish, you can have them share with their neighbor, or you can put them in breakout groups in Teams or whatever your learning platform is, and they can share in the breakout rooms remotely. When they come back as a whole class, you can have them share out, a few students share out, or you can have them post on Padlet, Jamboard, or Whiteboard, and then have the students vote on the top 3. Number 9. Number 9 is 3, 2, 1. So what you're going to do is have your students write 3 things that they learned, 2 things that they found interesting, and 1 question they still have. You can have them do this on Post-it notes, and they can post these in the parking lot as they leave if you have a parking lot in your room. Or you could have them, you could create a form or a Google form where students respond to this in Teams, your Google Classroom, whatever your learning management system is. And then if you see that the students have questions that dictate that they still have some areas that they need further understanding in, you can use that for your next lesson. Wow, we're at number 10. Okay, so number 10 is called the minute paper. So what you're going to do is you're going to have a timer set up for 1 minute, and you're going to allow the students to write what they understood about the lesson in 1 minute. And I like this because for those students who are adamant about writing or resistant to writing or just don't like writing, 1 minute is not a long time. They're not, it's not a long time for them to write. And I like this minute paper check for understanding. Thank you for staying to the end of the video. Guess what? I have bonuses for you. You are so fortunate that you stayed to the end of the video because you get the bonus. So the first one, of course, I couldn't do a check for understanding without including Kahoot. My students are wild about Kahoot. They love it. They ask for it. Kahoot is a site where you can either find other teachers who have created content for you related to what your lesson is, and you can use that, or you can create your own questions in Kahoot. And how Kahoot works is those questions are projected on the board, but the students also have it on their devices, and then they choose the answer for that question. So on their phones, they generally see a circle, a triangle, a square, a rectangle, or something like that. And that circle, square, rectangle has an answer beside it. So the students love Kahoot. And you can also keep up with their progress in Kahoot. You can keep up with their grades, their percentages of answers that they've gotten correct on Kahoot. And this also gives you a quick way to gauge their understanding as well. And this is the bonus. This one is called the Double Entry Notebook. Simply, it's a T-chart. And students in person can do this on paper, or you can have them use Word or some other application, and they're going to create a T-chart. And on the left side of the T-chart, they're going to put quotations that were related to that lesson. And then on the right side, they're going to record why they chose those quotations. So that is our bonus. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of the video. Remember to check the descriptions so that way you can get the links that were mentioned in today's video. And remember to also post in the comments what ways are working for you when you to check for understanding with your students, so that others in the community can glean from what you have seen success with it. Thank you so much for posting in the comments, because we want to make sure that this Education Noir is a community for all. Thank you so much, and until next time.